Overnight, Harley riders across 12 states became outlaws. Without warning, without a vote. If you think it ends with the Sportster 883, watch till the end, because the fight for your right to ride is just getting started. The 12-state ambush that changed everything. Overnight, Harley riders across 12 states became outlaws, and their bikes hadn't changed a bit. It began quietly. There were no headlines, no press conferences, and certainly no debates in state legislatures. In fact, most riders didn't know anything had changed until they got a letter in the mail, or worse, were pulled over on a routine ride and informed their registration was no longer valid. Their beloved motorcycle, the Harley-Davidson Sportster 883, had just been swept off the road by a wave of bureaucratic enforcement so swift, so surgical, that many assumed it had to be a mistake. But it wasn't. The ban hit 12 states in total. California, New York, Oregon, Illinois, Washington, Massachusetts, Maryland, Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Colorado, and Pennsylvania all moved within weeks of each other. The coordination was suspiciously clean. State departments of motor vehicles operating under revised internal guidance began revoking or rejecting registrations tied to the Sportster 883, specifically models produced prior to the 2019 production cycle. The language used in most of the letters was vague. Some cited non-compliance with updated emissions requirements. Others referred to safety concerns. In some cases, owners were told the bike had aged out of a compliance window, even though they had passed inspections just months prior. What made the ban so infuriating was not just its scope, but its method. No laws were passed. No public comment period was offered. This was not legislation, it was administrative warfare, and riders were the casualties. And just like that, tens of thousands of legal motorcycles became illegal without a single vote cast. But the real firestorm hadn't even begun. If this story's hitting home, smash that like button and drop a comment. Has your bike been targeted? Let's put real stories on the record. Inside the rider backlash. For many, it wasn't just a bike, it was their identity. And now it was illegal. The Harley Sportster 883 wasn't just another motorcycle, it was a lifestyle. For working-class riders, first-time owners, and small-town commuters, the 883 was Harley's most affordable gateway into the culture. Now that entry point had been ripped away. When the news spread that states had begun rejecting the 883, riders reacted with a mix of disbelief and rage. John Ramirez, a disabled veteran from upstate New York, had spent 2 years restoring a 2012 Sportster 883 with his son. "We didn't just build a bike," he said, "we built a bond." When his registration was pulled, he said it felt like the government had erased their work. His son cried the day they pushed the bike back into the garage. They weren't the only ones. In Portland, Oregon, baristas, mechanics, and delivery workers posted videos of impounded bikes and canceled tags. One owner claimed she lost her side hustle entirely. Her 883 was the only vehicle she could afford, and now it was stuck in legal limbo. In Pennsylvania, collectors gathered in garages to mourn not just the loss of use, but the collapse of resale value. "Try selling a banned bike," one owner said. "It's like trying to sell a house with no plumbing." Used buyers felt swindled. Mechanics felt betrayed. Independent dealers who had stocked and serviced 883s for years suddenly faced a flood of confused, angry customers and no real answers to give them. These weren't luxury bike owners. They were people who had budgeted, scraped, and saved for their piece of the open road, and now it was being towed off their driveways by state orders. When they demanded answers, what they heard left them stunned. They can ban the bike, but they can't ban the spirit. The gear we wear is part of that spirit. You'll find our go-to picks in the description. Gear that's built for real riders. The legal logic. No one asked for. Officials claimed it was about safety, but the numbers tell a different story. As backlash grew, state agencies issued statements blaming the bans on noise, emissions, and crash data. But when riders looked closer, those justifications started to crumble. Take noise, for example. The Sportster 883 has a signature rumble sure, but so do dozens of other bikes, including newer Harleys that weren't banned. States cited updated noise limits, yet provided no consistent measurement or threshold. The standards seemed to shift depending on the model. Then came emissions. Officials pointed to new federal rules from 2023 claiming older 883s didn't qualify. But if that were the real reason, why weren't older trucks, cars, or even lawn equipment being pulled off the streets? The crash data defense was the weakest of all. Experts laughed at the idea that a midweight motorcycle posed a greater threat than a massive SUV. The 883 was no more dangerous than any other Harley, and arguably safer for beginners. Still, the ban stayed in place. Riders were told it was about safety, but the logic didn't hold. Something else was going on, and it wasn't about protecting the public. And then someone traced the paperwork to its real source. Who pulled the strings behind the ban? This wasn't a fluke, it was a campaign, and the fingerprints lead somewhere very specific. As rider coalitions filed public records requests, a pattern came into focus. Identical language in DMV notices, coordinated timing, references to vague best practices. One name kept appearing: the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. This nonprofit had quietly circulated a guidance document in late 2023 recommending a phased retirement of older motorcycles deemed non-compliant with future emissions and noise goals. The Sportster 883, long-running, loud, and affordable, became an easy target. What looked like 12 separate state bans was actually part of a coordinated playbook, quietly executed without public debate. And Harley-Davidson? They didn't fight it. After discontinuing the 883 in 2022, Harley shifted focus to high-end models like the Sportster S and Nightster. Insiders say the company saw the bans as a clean break from its budget bikes. Environmental groups, insurance lobbyists, and urban planners added pressure behind the scenes, pushing for quieter, cleaner, and more expensive motorcycles in cities. Together, they built a strategy that reshaped the road without ever needing to step into the spotlight. And then Harley made the move no one expected. The day Harley killed its working-class icon. It wasn't just discontinued, it was erased. In 2022, Harley quietly retired the Sportster 883. No fanfare, no tribute, just gone. Replaced by sleeker, pricier machines. For loyal riders, it wasn't just disappointing, it was betrayal. For decades, the 883 had been Harley's working-class icon. It lined bar lots and small-town festivals. It was the first bike for mechanics, veterans, barbers, the ones who couldn't drop $20,000 but still craved the open road. The 883 wasn't flashy. It was tough, cheap, and fixable with a wrench and a weekend. Internally, Harley called it strategic repositioning, but to riders it felt like abandonment. The 883's power wasn't in performance. It was in what it stood for. Grit over gloss, freedom over finance. It let anyone ride, not just the rich. When Harley pulled the plug, it wasn't just ending a model. It was ending a promise. We're not building for you anymore. But Harley wasn't done rewriting its past. Harley's pivot to premium. Harley's new direction says one thing loud and clear: if you can't afford the future, you don't belong in it. In the wake of the 883's disappearance, Harley introduced a bold new line built around the Revolution Max engine, a liquid-cooled, high-performance platform that powered models like the Sportster S and the Nightster. These bikes were faster, sleeker, and equipped with advanced electronics. They were Harley's answer to European rivals and younger, tech-savvy riders who had never cared for the grumble of an old-school V-twin. On paper, it was an innovation. In practice, it was a shift in allegiance. The new Revolution Max models launched with price tags that placed them well outside the reach of most first-time buyers. Base models hovered near $15,000 before any upgrades or accessories. Financing a new Sportster S became more expensive than leasing a midsize SUV. For those who had once stretched every dollar to buy an 883, the message was clear. This brand no longer has room for your budget. Even the styling said so. The once rounded tanks and peanut silhouettes were replaced by angular edges and minimalist lines. Exhaust tones softened. Chrome vanished. Everything rebellious was engineered out in favor of compliance, control, and curb appeal. Harley's marketing echoed the shift. Campaigns spoke of performance heritage, not rebellion. Longtime Harley enthusiasts didn't just feel alienated, they felt replaced. And that shift sent shockwaves through Harley's own community. Harley's rebellion becomes compliance. They built a brand on rebellion and then sanitized it for emissions testing. Harley once promised escape, defiance, and raw power. It was loud, imperfect, and unapologetic. Now, it's quiet, sleek, and engineered for compliance. The transformation went beyond engines. It reshaped identity. Old-school riders noticed the difference instantly. The rumble was gone. The edges softened. Chrome was replaced by matte plastic. Pipes were hushed to meet regulations. What once felt like a rolling rebellion now feels curated and cleaned up for showroom floors and emissions charts. Harley's outlaw legacy was being overwritten by corporate strategy. Models began sounding more like specs than statements. The brand's grit gave way to branding. Inside dealerships, generational tension grew. Younger riders loved the tech. Older riders muttered, "This ain't Harley anymore." Online forums erupted with frustration. The bikes were still beautiful, but the soul, the roar, was being slowly tuned out. The slogan said, "Live to ride," but it now felt more like, "Comply to ride." And while the culture war raged, the lawyers stepped in. Emissions or excuses? The fine print behind the crackdown. The emissions excuse doesn't hold up under pressure, and here's why. As the bans across 12 states triggered legal complaints and rider lawsuits, environmental regulators began offering a simple justification. The Harley Sportster 883 no longer met modern emission standards, but like many things in regulatory politics, the reality was messier and much more suspicious. The Environmental Protection Agency had long monitored motorcycle emissions, and while the 883 wasn't the cleanest engine on the road, it also wasn't an outlier. In fact, Harley had routinely passed emissions testing for that model through 2019 using tweaks and ECU calibrations that kept the bike in compliance without radically changing its character. But what regulators and industry insiders remembered most was a different scandal, the Super Tuner fiasco. In 2017, Harley-Davidson paid a multi-million-dollar fine for selling tuning devices that allowed riders to override emissions controls. The incident painted Harley as a rogue brand unwilling to play by environmental rules. Since then, many believe the company has overcorrected, bending over backwards to align with emissions policy to avoid future penalties. The retirement of the 883, they say, was less about emissions and more about optics. And that brings us to the numbers. Even a well-maintained Sportster 883 emits less greenhouse gas over 10 years than a full-size pickup used as a daily driver. Its real-world impact is minimal, especially given the relatively small rider base. And when you compare it to the battery footprint of electric motorcycles or the emissions generated during the production of liquid-cooled sport bikes, the 883 starts to look more like a scapegoat than a threat. In short, this wasn't about saving the planet, it was about scrubbing the brand clean, avoiding lawsuits, and shifting Harley's portfolio toward higher-margin products that played nice with regulators. What came next didn't come from Harley or the government, it came from the riders themselves. The riders strike back online. Hashtags turned into battle cries, and suddenly the ban wasn't quiet anymore. At first it was confusing, then rage. Across the 12 states where the Harley Sportster 883 had been outlawed, riders turned to the internet, not just to vent, but to organize. Posts flooded Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Save the 883 and Freedom to Ride became rallying cries across comment sections and live streams. One Facebook group, Keep the 883 Legal, exploded to over 25,000 members within days. Riders shared emotional stories. A single mom in Nebraska commuting to work, a veteran in Ohio managing PTSD, a mechanic in New York whose side business vanished overnight. Their outrage spread fast and went viral. YouTube creators jumped in, posting interviews, breakdowns, and live stream protests. One mechanic even filmed himself dismantling an 883, saying Harley had killed its soul. Then came the petitions. A Change.org campaign demanding repeal hit 100,000 signatures in under 2 days. The movement was no longer online, it was everywhere. Then one video exploded across the country. The viral video that sparked a movement. A single traffic stop, one camera, and a statewide scandal. It happened on a quiet suburban street in southern Illinois. A rider named Marco Alvarez was pulled over for what he thought was a routine license check. Instead, the officer cited him for violating the newly adopted sound compliance regulation, claiming his stock Harley Sportster 883 was idling too loud. Marco, a former Marine and father of 3, had installed no aftermarket parts. His bike came off the dealership floor exactly as is. The moment was captured on his helmet cam, a calm, polite rider growing increasingly confused as the officer explained that the 883 didn't meet revised compliance guidelines and would have to be towed. The footage showed Marco's kids watching from their driveway as their dad's bike was loaded onto a flatbed truck. By morning, the clip had racked up over 3 million views on YouTube. The media storm hit like a thunderclap. National outlets picked up the story. Marco appeared on cable news shows. Influencers stitched the footage into reaction videos. The image of a father being stripped of his legal property over decibel levels touched a nerve that ran far deeper than motorcycles. Suddenly, the 883 ban wasn't just a motorcycle story. It was a civil liberties story. Lawmakers couldn't ignore the backlash, and what they did next shocked everyone. Capitol clash. Suddenly, lawmakers were riding shotgun with angry bikers. By week 3 of the public backlash, pressure reached state capitals fast. In Tennessee, a bipartisan resolution slammed the ban as arbitrary and economically harmful. Wisconsin rushed a bill to restore legal status for all registered 883s. And in Texas, a group of state senators held a press conference, riding in on motorcycles. What began as grassroots outrage had become a full-fledged political movement. Republicans called it government overreach. Democrats warned of economic fallout for local businesses. For once, they agreed. Riders packed town halls and city meetings in denim and leather, demanding answers face-to-face. Meanwhile, social media kept the fire burning. Live updates from legislative floors went viral. Riders posted selfies with lawmakers. Capitol ride-ins rolled through Minnesota, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Then came the shift. National news outlets picked up the story. Suddenly, this wasn't about one bike. It was about power, regulation, and who really runs the road. Still, not everything was moving forward. While politicians made promises, dealerships were dying. Shuttered shops and broken trust. The ban didn't just kill bikes, it killed businesses. For local Harley dealerships, the ban was more than a political statement. It was an existential crisis. In upstate New York, the owner of Empire Harley-Davidson watched over 70% of his Sportster inventory become unsellable overnight. In Ohio, a family-run dealership laid off half its staff after 3 bulk orders of 883 parts were canceled by suppliers too scared to be caught in a regulatory crossfire. At first, corporate Harley-Davidson remained silent. Then came a vague press release touting the success of its new Revolution Max lineup and affirming its commitment to environmental standards and rider safety. The message was clear: don't expect backup. Dealers were livid. Many had spent decades as Harley's frontline ambassadors. They taught new riders how to shift gears, helped returning veterans find the right fit, hosted charity rides, and sponsored community events. Now they were being left behind, not just by regulators, but by the very brand they had helped build. Parts distributors were caught in limbo. Mechanics stopped ordering 883 specific components, fearing they'd be left with stock they couldn't move. Custom shops watched their bookings dry up as owners feared riding illegal bikes would result in impoundment. And then came the final insult, from halfway around the world. The next chapter in this story wouldn't be written in Milwaukee or Washington, but in a country Harley once laughed off as irrelevant. Abandoned at home, thriving abroad. In India, Harley launched a brand new bike. In America, they buried one. Just months after the Harley Sportster 883 was effectively banned across 12 U.S. states, Harley-Davidson unveiled the X440 in India, a lightweight, affordable model priced at a fraction of its American counterparts. With its air-cooled engine and retro-styled frame, the bike bore more resemblance to the classic American rides than the high-tech premium models Harley now pushes stateside. And in India, it sold out on day one. The irony hit like a gut punch. As American riders fought for the right to keep their working-class machines on the road, Harley was offering nearly the same experience abroad, only cheaper, simpler, and more accessible. For riders in Delhi and Mumbai, the Harley dream had never been more alive. Meanwhile, in Detroit and Des Moines, that dream was being legislated into extinction. Harley's global pivot had been years in the making. With domestic sales flatlining and younger American buyers opting for imports, Harley shifted its strategy. New markets like India, Thailand, and Indonesia became its future. There, middle-class riders craved authenticity and reliability, the very values that once defined the Sportster line in the U.S. And so Harley began tailoring bikes for them. Smaller engines, lower price tags, minimalist builds. Back home, the message was clear but unspoken. Harley's future no longer centers on American riders. And while international markets surged with excitement, American workers were left behind. The right to ride. Is riding a Harley now a political act? What began as a quiet regulatory change has rapidly escalated into a full-blown national debate over personal liberty. Civil liberties groups, typically focused on speech or privacy, are stepping into the motorcycle world. Their concern is simple yet powerful. Can the government strip someone's right to operate a legally purchased, federally compliant machine without due process? The American Civil Liberties Union has begun exploring whether these bans violate the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection and due process. Some legal scholars go further, suggesting a First Amendment angle, arguing that motorcycles like the Sportster 883 represent cultural expression as much as mechanical utility. It might sound dramatic, but this isn't without precedent. Just as gun ownership is viewed as both a right and a form of identity, for many Americans riding a Harley, especially an 883, is personal. It's tradition, expression, and rebellion rolled into one. Now rallies double as protests. Lawsuits are emerging in states like Michigan and New Hampshire, where vehicle autonomy is seen as sacred. While judges debate constitutional limits, something else is already shifting. Because the market has spoken, and it's not waiting for a verdict. Because the markets, they've already made their decision. If you're still watching, this fight matters to you. Subscribe now. We're exposing every threat to your right to ride, one video at a time. What happens to America's roads? Now, this isn't just about one bike, it's about the future of freedom on American roads. The moment the Harley-Davidson Sportster 883 disappeared from showrooms and service bays, something shifted. The used market exploded almost overnight. Listings tripled across motorcycle resale sites. Prices jumped dramatically. Bikes that once sold for less than $6,000 were now demanding $10,000, even $12,000. It wasn't just demand, it was desperation, nostalgia, and scarcity driving the surge. Collectors began snapping up mint-condition 883s, not to ride, but to preserve. The machine had become more than just a bike. It was now a relic of a fading era, a physical symbol of a time when freedom came with a key, not an app or subscription. For everyday riders, the message was clear and harsh. If you couldn't afford Harley's premium lineup or navigate new restrictions, you didn't belong. Meanwhile, electric bikes, mopeds, and rental scooters flooded urban markets. On paper, it looked like innovation. But for millions of working-class Americans, it felt like erasure. And if 12 states can quietly ban a legal motorcycle, what's next? The Sportster 883 may be gone from production, but in every protest ride, every cold start, every echoing throttle, its spirit is very much alive. Who gets to decide what America rides? The Sportster 883 was never just metal and chrome, it was a statement, a sound, a symbol of what it meant to move freely through this country, on your own terms. Now that sound is being silenced, not just by bans, but by a vision of the future where freedom comes pre-approved and pre-programmed. But here's the thing, you don't kill a legacy by banning a bike. You only prove why it mattered in the first place. If you're still watching, you already know this goes deeper than just one bike. The bans, the silence, the corporate betrayal, it's all connected. So if you felt any of this in your own garage, drop a comment and let your story be heard. Hit like if you believe riders still deserve a say, and subscribe if you're ready to follow this fight to the end. Because what Harley just did is only part of the story. The next video exposes the brands still selling junk motorcycles and tricking honest riders into buying them.